Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. I'm back on my other chair. We are in the Meno today. Now, if you are following with the live streams at the time of recording, you will know that I have been focusing on philosophical midwifery for a while. I'm taking a break from the Meno for about a week. But I think it's time to jump back in. I think we're gathering a lot of good understanding, hopefully, or bits and pieces at least, from philosophical midwifery, which is, again, for new watchers or listeners, philosophical midwifery is not someone who gives birth to babies and who happens to be contemplative while she's delivering children. No. It's analogous to that, but it's to give birth to false ideas that block us from our goals. And those false beliefs are called pathologos. And it's the distorted image or inversion of the logos. And so the logos is what we are learning here in the Meno. Everything that we've read so far has been the logos. The questions that Meno has about virtue, or rather the upgraded questions, what is virtue, rather than let's pretend Meno knows what it means to be good, and he's asking his question, can I teach that? Well, so what is virtue? Is it something taught or learned or something else? What is teaching and learning? Socrates' response. The terms he pulled out at the beginning. Oh, these are the influences that you have that we're working with or working against. Parents, society, parental connections, links to wealth, his partner, his teacher, his school. It's from all of that his idea of virtue, what it means to be the best kind of person, it's from that milieu or that world that his false view of virtue comes from. So the acknowledgement of that by Socrates must be part of the logos. Obviously, he spent a lot of time introducing the dialectic. That's the structure of the logos, or the skill of the logos. And there's a couple of extra things that we are going to focus in. Before we do that, let's get the boring technical stuff. The goal, that there is a goal, that's the logos. The logos has a goal, that it involves an initiation experience or a change of the way you're thinking. So it's not just, the logos isn't just the model for education or understanding, it's also the model for personal development or spirituality or psychic development. So all of that is the logos. But also, this is something that we can... Okay. There's a lot of interesting things happening, so I've got to pace myself in how I explain them. The first one that we mentioned was midwifery and how we've been learning about that. And what I think we can do now is bring that with us into our reading. However many episodes you've seen or however many times you've read through the Orange Book, and our goal is to read it 100 times, because Pierre Grimes himself, who wrote the book, likes to remind people of an ancient Chinese proverb: if you want to master a text, read it 100 times. So whatever number out of 100 you're on, that's fine. Bring it with us into the Meno, because something that we have seen time and time again is Plato lacks the pathologos. We have our own speculations of why that might be, but there are no dialogues outlining the pathologos and philosophical midwifery. What does that mean? We're missing half of the interaction. These are human beings having an interaction. What's the fundamental two forces at play within the human narrative? The movement from the pathologos to the logos, or the dynamics within ourselves, a unsuspected loyalty to a false image and an associated belief about yourself, an image of yourself. That way of thinking, belief in images, compared to understanding, reason, reflection, freedom, and of course the state that we looked at the end of chapter 2 in the midwifery book. Automatically, maybe that's not the wrong word, to act spontaneously and authentically with the full force of your being in the situation most appropriate for the situation, and without any anxiety before or after, or blame after or before. A nice thing to remind ourselves of. So that's the interplay. So that way of being, and that the functioning through understanding, or the dialectic, or the logos, is the inner dynamic that we're facing moment to moment as the human issue. Between that ideal state of being and functioning through understanding and seeing and following of the logos, which is the intelligible pattern, understandable and knowable pattern that exists within reality, and another way of being that's kind of like that. And instead of seeing the patterns that's there, we project onto the world the pattern, and we think we're doing that first thing, but we're not. We're projecting images and beliefs. Fundamentally about the reality, but also ourself in it. So that's the human game, the human dynamic, the human struggle moment to moment, and everything we do is in kind of service of that. Either the
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
Human quest, or the archetypal hero's journey of making that movement from one to the other, from the projections of our false images and beliefs from our pathologos, which is an analogy that we carry with us, that every moment is lesser than the realist moment, which was a certain key moment when we were very young, when we had the appearance of goodness, the appearance of care, the appearance of knowledge, the appearance of beauty. So the appearance of what we're actually seeing, we fell for, because we lack the logos, because we're babies. Just wee babies, like a baby chicken or a baby phoenix. I can't expect this baby phoenix to have the wisdom or mastery of the logos. I'm not equating those together. I'm not equating those together. But what is the true nature of wisdom is a puzzle I've had for a very, very long time, and I still have, and I've been frustrating. I've been, what's the word from the text? I've been all out at sea. I've been stung. I've been in aporia about that question for specifically these last couple of weeks, especially. But yeah, so I'm not saying what wisdom is or in it. What I'm saying is I can't expect baby phoenix to have the mastery of the logos. The adult phoenix at the back, mummy phoenix, has. Equally so, and therefore, if that's the human dynamic that we're all in, it is absurd, irrational, and unnecessary to ever inflict suffering in a form of teaching or punishment or whatever. Because the problems we have are simply because we didn't have a mastery of the logos before we could talk. You shouldn't punish someone for that. Ever. Silly. Instead, acknowledge that the human journey is from that, the carrying of that analogy about self and reality from a situation that you were in and did your best to address without the logos, carrying that as a false analogy and projecting it on to each moment, that's what causes our problems and prevents us from, well, doing what we're doing, but without the projection in the way. The actual beauty, seeking that and finding that as the model for the greater, and using that as an analogy in everything we do, but not as an analogy of what's real, but analogy of the model of beauty and justice. That's the point that is made in the Republic, by the way. And instead of projecting the Pathologos pattern of our beliefs and roles onto reality and not knowing we're doing it and being kind of a slave or a zombie to it, again, you wouldn't punish a zombie for being a zombie. It's the virus in its brain that's making it do it. Without that projection, we're simply seeing the pattern that exists anyway. The thing that we are born, or we have on our side of the game, the soul, like the being a living creature, a soul, living creature. Not as in, not the physical thing, but the ourselves, our soul that is confused and doesn't know what's going on, but seeks to, really wants to. That seeks that pattern, which we call the logos, and so we talk about following the logos or seeing the logos, sharing your understanding and seeing of the logos, developing a mastery of that as an art, and that art can be used either in philosophical midwifery for accurately addressing that past scene, so you no longer project and you're free of that block, or what Socrates calls purification. So that's philosophical midwifery to remove the pathologos. And that same mastery of the art of the dialectic can be used here in the Meno to actually look for, see, and follow the logos. And so we can wonder if that's what Socrates is demonstrating for us, because he's engaged in that most meaningful challenge that we have been reading in midwifery. That is, not only to do these things, make that transition from beliefs to understanding, from pathologos to seeing the logos, and master it as an art and talk about it, share it with others. That's what it's for. So here he is, Socrates, our man. Oh.
I'm looking for someone to share.
You're a wizard, Harry.
He's our wizard.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Doing just that, talking to Meno, somebody from wealth, someone from privilege, somebody who might become an official, have power over others, or already does have power over others, by the way, as he has a slave. So already we're being told he has power over others, and thinks he knows what it means to be good, or virtue, good within our soul, but also our functioning, just all-round good virtue or excellence. So in the text we see excellence / virtue, because virtue is kind of an old-fashioned word. What the heck does virtue mean? I think it's a combination. If I was to remember an explanation I got that I liked, I like because I think it's accurate. It's a mixture of excellence, like the best we can be. So Pierre, the author of the midwifery book, would always talk about the importance of seeking, we don't have to worry about it. The tradition of midwifery says you have to necessarily be seeking excellence or the highest functioning or the highest expression or whatever you're doing, necessarily to provide the conditions for your problem to surface. But also in the Republic, that's, I mean, in philosophy, that idea of seeking excellence has been tied to phronesis, which is one of those questions, what the heck is phronesis? I mean, well, actually, does it come up here? It's come up in this text. The way it's been used in this text seems to be pointing to something beyond even reality itself, or pure being, or pure ousia, or that model of excellence and beauty. Yeah, phronesis. So what is virtue? Kind of a mixture of that, excellence, but also there is a kind of innate you-ness, which is another feature. And the way I had it explained is, a baby goat has everything within it already, just as a baby goat, to be the best damn goat he can be. like the standing on the mountains that are almost like vertical, the living on the moss, the having the weird eyes and the making the funny noises, to having strange thoughts that, you know, are behind those strange eyes and but are crazy probably. The way they lead sheep, anyway, all of that stuff that makes goats amazing is within it already as a baby. It has the virtue of goatness, so the excellence, but also the, what's going on in my background? Hang on. So I had to check something on my OBS. That's the program I use to stream. So the virtue of goatness is within it. It has its own excellence innately within it, so long as it can somehow be itself. And another example, I think this one from Socrates. A good horse trainer wants the horse to be educated into its excellence of horseness, whereas somebody who's a trainer of archery wants them to be the best archer. So when you're talking about it with the horse, the virtue of the horse is what they talk about. So it's excellence, but it's also some sort of innate you-ness, which is interesting because that says something about reality, doesn't it? That you are your best when you are your full, authentic self. And I think that's another way of making sense of what we read yesterday in the midwifery. I think I should probably find them, just so we can date this for people, and I should probably do this more often in the future. The midwifery episode I'm talking about would be I'm a few behind, so about number 61. Yeah. So around there, we were talking about reading at the end of chapter 2, the authentic state of self that we were reading was described in all of those really great qualities, most appropriate acting, being in the flow state. Yeah, and the way of getting there is removing a false idea of the self, so it's consistent. If you want to function in the best possible way, you have to be your most authentic self. Now, I don't know if... Yeah. I was wondering if focusing on its functioning rather than just knowing the truth might be the wrong approach. But, I mean, if they're tied together, it doesn't matter, does it? So, back onto the subject. Okay, let me backtrack here. This is the virtue, right? This is the virtue, kind of an innateness, but an excellence. Can it be taught? Which assumes that Meno, someone in a position of power, thinks it can be. And by the way, his idea of virtue or excellence, which we all should be aiming towards, by the way, but also, of course, it's not just because of moral reasons, but because we want to be our happiest selves and most functioning well selves anyway. It involves hurting people. Doing good to your friends and harm to your enemies. If the human journey that we said last time was behind all narratives on the midwifery stream, if I shouldn't do this, okay. If the human struggle, the human game, is to move from the pathologos to the logos, or from the false idea of the self to the true self, mastery and being and showing of your true self, if that's the human thing. And it can be demonstrated that the false idea of the self can be seen as the fundamental root cause of all of the biggest kinds of human problems, collectively and individually. It can also be shown that it is the next stage in human evolution necessarily. And it can also be shown the implications if we don't move into this next stage of evolution, pull our pants up, start being a bit more mature than with being, and get to fucking work, learning the logos and applying midwifery to address the root cause of all human problems, both individually and collectively. So yeah, let's do that. If that's the nature of reality, as it were back then, as it is now, then and we have seen that one of the characteristics of the pathologos, the cause of our problems, is a state of certainty that is being contrasted in the text against stung or aporia, curious and open. It's a state of certainty. And also, as we read, it functions to be unable to participate in the logos, but also functions to destroy it in order to defend its own existence. Balloons. So the pathologos functions or sticks its nose out of the water when we are participating in logos. And the more we are sharing in logos, the more it's likely to come out. The highest sharing in the logos is simply to see reality as it is, with a recognition of self and knowing yourself. So that's the being. Which means logos goes with us all the way to the top of any development we can make in that one game we're here to play. What does that mean? That means that's what we have to be following in order to surface the entirety of the pathologos, because it functions to shut down the logos, to shut down our participation in logos, reality, and self. That's how it functions, and that's why it's a problem. So when we say, hey, this is the cause of all problems, what we mean by a problem is that, and an inability to share in self, mind, and logos. So what? So for anyone who is born human and has not yet completed that journey, or at least gone far enough along that journey, And for anybody in a state of certainty about that which they actually don't know, like Meno. For all of these people, their enemy is Logos and people like Socrates. The very thing they're here to master and the very people that can help them. That's your enemy, or that's what is perceived as being the enemy, because that's what the Pathologos does. That's why it's a problem. If it didn't do that, it would be a different sort of a thing, less of a problem, because if it's a different sort of a thing, then you can apply reason, reflection on using the true model from that state of self to fix that problem. It's a state of being that allows you to solve problems and continue to explore. And from what Socrates says, even beyond this physical existence, which is why it's what we're here to do. Thus, we have someone who's just like so many people existing today, who is certain they know what the good is, often from similar backgrounds, wealth, privilege, education, connections. And part of it involves harming your enemies and therefore I will function to try and harm the best people, my own goals, and what is needed to actually solve any problems and reach our higher good and evolve. So quite a dangerous situation for Socrates, our man here, who's talking to him anyway. And we can ask how effective he was, how well did he do, what grade would we give him. But also we can take with us an understanding of philosophical midwifery to recognize this is what he's navigating against. Every time Meno starts to go, does a speech insulting Socrates, calling him a this or a that, a flat-headed fish, threatening him, oh, if you leave the state, oh, you will come back in a body bag, my friend. That kind of crap. We know what that is because we're also reading philosophical midwifery. Now, I say no. Well, if you have been reading along and doing your best to understand, put the pieces together, using the dialectic if you can, and testing it in your experience, yeah, you know for yourself. We know what's going on here. Now, Socrates doesn't dip into philosophical midwifery. I don't know if he did at the time and Plato never recorded it because of Plato's issue with it, because it's linked to, anyway, that's a different conversation. It's linked to Homer and the Iliad. And Socrates was murdered because he did by people who thought that you had to blindly obey official dogma of Homer, even though Socrates was a midwife himself. So he might have had a bee in his bonnet. One of many theories. Nevertheless, we can bring with us our understanding of the Pathologos, of the significance of what Socrates is doing, of the danger he's in, of the significance for humanity, of him being able to do such an amazing thing, talk about what's most meaningful with the most powerful person who has the most potential to do the most harm, but also sees you as an enemy and has a false belief about justice that it's okay to hurt people so long as you perceive them as your enemy. If there was ever a dragon to be slain in a mythological representation of what we're here to do as human beings, it's this. However, to fully appreciate what's going on, we need to have been doing the work of philosophical midwifery as well and bringing it with us. And also just to be able to read it at this level. Your own Pathologos will have been coming up many, many times to stop you because this is the Logos. Same reason. And the Pathologos says this is an enemy. And yet it's very important to do. In fact, it's the only thing we're here to do. He's just a master of the game. Now, also, I thought it was a nice time to come back to the Meno because not only can we bring back that level of work we've been doing in midwifery, we also did our first streamer react thing, which is a thing. It's like a meta of streaming and podcasts and stuff where the person that you like reacts to other people's content. And so there was yesterday our first one of those. Hooray. And I thought it went very well. Kind of. It was a streamer doing a Palestine fundraising. I think he streamed for 3 days and had had various guests on. I think maybe he seemed really overtired, so I don't know if he stayed awake for 3 days. But the people he was interviewing were doing a lot of work keeping him up. Anyway, we had a look at that, and there was a conversation between these two streamers. One's a streamer, one's a YouTuber. Or one's a Twitch streamer, one's a YouTube streamer. Anyway, they were talking about the same thing. The blowback that they face. They're not even talking about the Logos. They're just talking about, well, I guess the closest thing, which would be participating in reason and understanding to remove our projection, see what's really happening in the world, and do our best to solve those problems through understanding their causes and wanting to help everyone. So there's an understanding there, which is different from beliefs and pathologos and stuff. And there is an empathy there, or a care there. And the chapter 2 that we just read of midwifery is the famous opening that we've read many times. It is entirely possible to verify for yourself you live in a caring and intelligible universe. Which is a state of being we seek to, replicate or move into or recognize within ourselves or align or harmonize with. So they do it as not applied to the soul and the self, but the society. Thus, they're having a fundraiser to raise money to help the people affected in the Palestinian genocide. So, good people, smart people. Anyway, in doing this great work and trying to connect with people who've been brainwashed or, again, who have stuck in pathologos groups, they're averse or hostile to reason itself, they're facing the possible dangers that we talk about Socrates facing. People getting mad just because they're thinking, they're reasoning. They don't know why. They hate these people. And they've done videos, there are a lot of streamers and creators themselves who bring together a large audience, bound together by their collective pathologos, or similar enough pathologos, or way of being, that get furious at the creators who can participate in reason and care, logos and providence, humanness and understanding, head and heart. And they make content saying as much, and they are literally furious to the point where they become irrational and illogical in a comical way, which some people sometimes is called like a barking dog or something, or a goblin. I think one of them calls a certain state of depravity, being in goblin mode or something like that. So in this, the thing that we just looked at together and had our commentary of, was them talking about facing that. Facing those sort of people, facing those sort of reactions. But also they talked about how do we navigate so that we're safe and we don't trigger those reactions, but then so we don't push people away, but then also we don't kowtow, but also we can have fun. It's not just the terrible people that get to laugh at doing terrible things. We can have fun and laugh at terrible things or the irrationality behind them. So the possible dangers and the appreciation of the art of walking that line between demanding or following the logos and being encouraging, or here's another analogy, to plant seeds. You can say a lot to plant seeds, but without the right soil. So saying a lot or being direct, as Socrates has done at different times, necessary, but also creating a safe space of reflection and care and never any punishments or violence. That's fucked. That's stupid. You can't even get in the door if you haven't condoning. If you still want to condone people, if you still want to blame people, pretend that they are somehow responsible of the game they are born into without realizing it, at the moment at least, and you think that the next step after lying about them being in charge is to lie about them being innately bad, so they cause bad things, that's screwed up. And you want to go a step further and lie about them therefore needing to suffer as punishment, and to justify it you make a fourth lie that somehow punishment makes you good, as if the virtue of a horse is brought into the horse by hitting it. That's 4 terrible, terrible lies in a row. But hang on a second, if we stay in the conversation, there's a 5th lie at the end of it, that you get to be the one doing it. You get to be the one hitting the kid, kicking the puppy, genociding the baby, raping the this, stealing from the that. That's punishment. Can't bring any of that in. It's too many lies. One too many. It's 5 too many lies. And clearly we can see it's just the Pathologos pattern. So you won't see that until you begin the game, but you can't begin the game until you at least logically see those 5 premises and acknowledge them and have the character and quality as a human being, as a person, to say, yeah, now that I've understood it, I'm going to act that way. And then you won't have to, well, there'll be another level where you'll see, oh, of course that's what it is, because especially that 5th lie gives the game away. Because that state of being, when you are being the tyrant or being the oppressor or being the violent person or being the oppressive, violent, tyrant, sadist, enjoying it, that's the Pathologos model, clearly. In principle. Because the Pathologos model of excellence has to necessarily involve a position of authority, some sort of power over a person, but also, so you can get away with it, but also a crushing of the self and the logos of the other person, which is bad, and you see it's bad. Thus, the sadistic part of the pleasure in being the tyrant at work or being the racist or whatever. Clearly, it's Pathologos. Therefore, how do you defeat the Pathologos? Logos. How do you do the Logos? Make sure everyone's material conditions are met in a efficient, renewable, harmonious way so that we can spend the time reflecting on exactly what we're here to do. In a fun, friendly, rational, providential way. 3. Anyone not yet familiar or good enough of character yet to see that will ask the question, yeah, but where does the inflicting suffering come in? When do I get punishment? When do we get to make what? Nowhere. Nowhere in that sentence is there any room for punishment or in purposeful inflicting of suffering. So that just gets you in the door. Right, so I think I might have gone off a bit of a tangent with that imagery, but so what? So going back to the Meno, because in that interview they talked about the backlash from people still thinking it's okay to do violence, trying to do violence, not realizing they're just doing violence to silence good people and the Logos. Because that's what a problem does. Because for some reason they haven't either admitted they have a problem or they don't understand what a problem is, which is, I guess, why we're doing this channel, right? To understand what a problem is. Anyway, but that's why they're doing good work, of course, and we encourage them in every possible way we can, but also we benefit from these sorts of interviews and conversations, which is why I decided to try the React thing, because they're people doing what we're trying to do, like Socrates, actually talking about the things that will trigger the worst people, will trigger the worst and most powerful people. One of their very, very small streaming community who shares reason and reflection about what's meaningful in the world. One of them was detained at the time of recording by ICE agents at the airport and questioned about his political views as an American citizen before that he was allowed back in. So, doing what Socrates is doing, right? Talking to people like Meno. That is the most important thing to do, because what if they get in power with this false idea of justice, false idea of virtue? Which might be one of the reasons why Socrates keeps bringing it back to that question. Meno keeps saying, hey, can virtue be taught? No, let's find out what virtue is. So we're bringing all that back with us. The importance of it, the significance of its effect individually and collectively, and for the safety of our species, and for ending the terrible implications of pathologos like genocide and wealth inequality and capitalism and just infighting instead of doing this. But also, an appreciation for the people who are doing it. We mentioned them. And also appreciation that they are going through similar problems that Socrates and we all face. We face ourselves individually, and as we share it with the world, the problems that they face and the dangers they face in doing it. So character is needed, courage is needed. So all that in our back pocket. Let's jump into the reading.